For the first time in more than 5.5 years, we finally tonight have a few new answers to a question that has loomed over Indiana and over the town of Delphi. Who killed Abby Williams and Libby?
From the end of the bridge to, you got to go through. Now, I believe that the bodies were found about 50.
Born from a family's grief and determination. In April of 2020, Army soldier Vanessa Guillen went missing while stationed at one of the largest military installations.
That little music in the background, it goes, "Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious."
Right.
Knew about it or was there. He's as guilty as the person who committed.
Chilling details in the arrest of a suspected serial killer caught before he could strike again.
Him, they dropped the ball, man. Like they said, he went AWOL, and that he was a deserter, and nobody went to look for him.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder.
Like I said, we're going back. We were asked last time to kind of talk about the food, the grub truck video, and kind of give our perspective of it. The press release from the police department, it indicated that they're still trying to put pieces together from that night. Does that worry you at any point or at any bit that they're still trying to put those pieces together?
It's been over 5 weeks since little Kaylee Anthony vanished. Her mother, Casey, has been arrested for lying to police. She's being held without bail.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. Just me this time, as usual, Daniel. Hope everybody's having a great night. Good to see a lot of you guys in the live chat already. Appreciate everybody that's here. Today we're going to go back into the Delphi case. The Richard Allen hearings or trial has commenced, and there's been a lot of stuff that's come out already. There's been pictures released of how they were found. They've had testimony from those that found the girls, and testimony from investigators in the case, and some things have been dropped out and questioned by the defense. And so we'll get into all those things. Please hit that like, please hit that subscribe. All righty. So we're going to start off with a couple of days ago. This is day 4 of the trial. We're going to watch a video here. I'm going to pause it throughout this watch, and then I'll give you my opinion on what's going on and what I think about what is being said. Unfortunately, the trial is not being televised or recorded or any of those things for us to see real, accurate, 100% information. So we do need to take everything that's said here with a grain of salt, with the knowledge that these guys are writing things down as fast as they can. There might be things that are misinterpreted, miswritten, and misunderstood. So we'll take a look at it.
The crime scene investigator, the lead crime scene investigator, took the witness stand again today. He began his testimony last night, but then the court recessed until this morning. His name is Brian Oley. He was asked about the autopsy of the 2 girls, which he attended down in Terre Haute. They went through the evidence that was collected during that autopsy, including numerous swabs from several areas of the girls' bodies, as well as the clothes that Abby had on, and rape kits that were done on both of those girls. Now, there was no mention in court today about if those rape kits turned up anything of value. But during his cross-examination, defense attorney Brad Rosie went through the list of swabs and repeatedly asked the crime scene investigator if any of them had any DNA that tied Richard Allen to the crime scene. The answer to all of those questions was no. Now, the prosecution...
So that was one of the big things that came out, that, hey, is this case starting to fall apart? They're asking the questions about the swabs, the collection of evidence. Has anything DNA-wise connected back to Richard Allen? And the question was no. But there isn't the follow-up question like, well, is there DNA of anybody else that is found on these on the swabs or anything else? And so to me, that kind of tells me that there probably isn't, at least not DNA that they can't exclude out of maybe perhaps family members or friends of these girls who they may have been in contact with. I think, like, for instance, there was a hair in on the hand of, I believe it was Abby's hand, and in the arm area that I think is turning out. I've been told a couple of different things that they don't know yet, and I've been told things that it was one of the family members and of one of the girls. So if it's not something that is explainable, then I mean this crime happened, right? It's not bogus. It didn't happen. It's not a made up crime. There's real victims. These young ladies lost their lives. So unless there's DNA pointing to somebody else, there's no DNA. That doesn't really exclude Richard Allen as not being the guy. Now, if there was DNA from somebody else, I'd be more inclined to say, all right, okay, there's DNA from somebody else, meaning that, hey, maybe there is somebody else, or unknown DNA or something of that nature. But nothing. And if it was still unknown at the time of the trial, I think that would be something that you would want to question, especially given how long that it has taken for this trial to commence. So just wanted to point that out. This one of the things that the prosecution is saying is like, hey, any of that match back to Richard Allen. And, the person being, on the witness stand can't say, well, there wasn't anything outside of the normal people that we would have expected, because that's not what the question is. The question is Richard Allen's DNA found? And so that's just one of the clever ways, in my opinion, a lawyer will try to get like a certain narrative being built, especially early on in this trial.
Eventually objected to that line of questioning because the investigator was not the one who actually did the test. Judge Gall agreed, and Attorney Rosie moved on. Now, a lot of the focus today with the crime scene investigators yesterday and today really has been on the bullet that was found between the girls' bodies, which the prosecution alleges matches a gun owned by Richard Allen. Now, as we learned yesterday, the investigators only took pictures of the bullet as it was facing down into the ground. There are no pictures, we learned today, outside of those few at the scene. The defense has really, really gone hard at that. Attorney Brad Rosie got very confrontational during that line of questioning this morning. He asked the investigator if he would take more pictures if he could do it over again. The investigator answered no, he wouldn't. Now, the other main focus was on the branches that were found on top of the girls' bodies. We all remember that. The crime scene investigators, we learned yesterday, left those branches at the scene. Even though they had blood on them, they determined that they had no evidentiary value. Well, they must have changed their minds, because they ended up going back to get those branches a couple days later after being ordered to do so by someone. Attorney Brad Rosie asked the investigators if he believed that the sticks were placed there to communicate something. The investigator said no and told him he believed they were there to conceal the bodies. However, Rosie pointed out that the sticks did not really do anything to conceal the bodies. And as someone who saw those crime scene photos, you could tell that those sticks really didn't do anything to conceal the bodies. What their intention was, well, I'm not for sure on that. The defense.
All righty. So just kind of going back a little bit about what they were saying there, with the sticks, I too agree that those sticks should have been taken in way earlier, as the day that this happened. That should have been done. This was 2017. This is a small place. I'm not sure how advanced Delphi is when it comes to their technology stuff, especially early on in this investigation. It's not like, I'm not sure how long it took before, the Indiana State Police started taking over and getting there and doing their things. And so it may have been just a drop on a lack of from law enforcement. Let's see. Said bullet casing was found like non-LE. I don't know. I have a thing here. They did talk to the person who ended up finding the bullet, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But let me go back and find this real quick. Well, it doesn't matter. I was going to point out where the discussion about the bullet was, but we'll get to it. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so let me pull this up here. Let's bring this one in and listen to this a little bit and talk about it.
I know there's something you want to tell us about one key piece of evidence that was presented in court this morning. Yeah, that's right, and good afternoon, Meg. That key piece of evidence was Liberty German's cell phone, which was discovered on the scene where the two bodies were discovered. And the prosecution presented that into evidence. They also played a video that forensics experts were able to extract from that cell phone. That video was taken by Liberty German. It shows that she's pointing the camera in the direction, the phone on the camera, or the camera on the phone, in the direction of Abby. And behind Abby, you can see a man. Now, in that video, you could also hear Libby's voice. She was saying just a little bit, but just hearing her voice was enough to make her mother, who is in the courtroom, very emotional, as you can understand. It's been some time since she's heard her daughter's voice. The second key takeaway is about the chain of custody, and they spent a lot of time on this, talking to the crime scene investigator, the person that was in charge of that crime scene from Indiana State Police. And what they did there was the prosecution was trying to show that the investigation was methodical, that they took the evidence from the scene, and then once they took that evidence from the scene, they were able to preserve it in the proper manner. Now, the defense is trying to poke holes in the case, trying to point out different things that they think got mixed up during the investigation. Meg is calling me back now, so let's see here. You got me back, Meg?
No, they have some kind of phone issue there.
We're live on digital, right? On 21 Live Plus. Those things happen. So yeah, what I was saying is they were talking about the chain of command, and they spent a lot of time on that. The prosecution, again, trying to show that it was a thorough investigation by Indiana State Police. The defense trying to poke holes in that. One of the things that they talked about, Meg, was that some of the pictures from the crime scene show the investigators holding up pieces of evidence like the clothing. And they asked the crime scene investigator, hey, is that the best practice of what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to take the pictures? And he said, no, it's not the best practice. And so, again, that is an effort by the defense to try and poke some holes.
And I agree. That's probably not the best practice. I don't know if there were other pictures that were taken. You know, there may have been other pictures taken on the ground and where the clothes were located and things of that nature. But as far as taking the pictures there at the scene in the manner that they did it, obviously it's not the best practice now in today's world. You know, just as much as, you know, what today is acceptable would probably be out of date in the next, 8 years. So it's no matter what it is, it's not going to be the best practice because there's better practice now than there was 8 years ago. And I highly doubt that the best practice today will still be the best practice in anything when it comes to, you know, crime scenes and investigations and how you do things and technology 8 years from now. So again, you know, I get what they're trying to say, but it's kind of more like a little bit of smoke and magic for me here
in the investigation. And then, Meg, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the atmosphere there in the courtroom. I can tell you that Richard Allen is inside the Carroll County Courthouse. He is listening to the testimony. He's taking notes. He also talks to his attorneys from time to time, but other than that, showing very little emotion. The jurors are paying close attention, too. They're allowed to ask questions. Once the prosecution and defense are done with a witness, done asking questions, the jury can hand over handwritten questions to the judge. The judge then goes and meets with both the prosecution and the defense to whether that question will be allowed, and then she asks the questions of the witness. And those questions, I got to tell you, were pretty detailed questions about how the video was extracted, when it was extracted, the GPS location of where that video was taken and what it showed to the investigator. So what's clear from that, and what I'm trying to get across there, is that the jurors are really paying close attention. Meg?
And I know something that we've also been paying close attention to is family of the girls who has been in the courtroom the past couple of days and seeing their reactions to things that are being presented in court. Did you see any emotional reactions from either Abby or Libby's family today in court as well?
Yeah, and that emotional reaction came as they were playing that video because you hear Libby's voice. And you can just imagine that a mother who lost her child, once again, hearing the voice of her child on a video has got to be gut-wrenching. And Libby's mother was crying here in the courtroom. How could you blame her? Just an emotional moment for everyone in the courtroom. As you hear a girl who has passed away, you hear her voice on tape, likely moments before she was killed.
Yeah, that's extremely sad. I mean, I couldn't imagine what the family's going through. I hope they're okay. You know, I know this must be hard for them, you know, just kind of reliving everything all over again. All righty. So let's move on to day 5 of this trial. We're going to kind of speed things up a little bit because I really want to get, maybe not speed them up, but I really am excited to get towards the end as far as what was going on, what happened earlier. I think there's a lot of stuff, especially with the bullet thing, that has come out.
Joining us, can you tell us what stood out from today's proceedings?
Well, I think the most significant thing that we heard today was the testimony from the pathologist. We now know conclusively, without a doubt, the girls' manner and cause of death. We also heard a lot about their injuries and the effects that those injuries would have on their bodies and whether or not it would have been reasonable for them to scream or fight back. And also we learned that he can't determine the time of death, which is pretty significant to both sides, I would think.
Yeah, so the coroner talked about that.
So they couldn't determine the time of death on this. Let me go back and listen to this.
The effects that those injuries would have on their bodies and whether or not it would have been reasonable for them to scream or fight back. And also we learned.
And so as far as that, first and foremost, the screaming and fighting back and the amount of injuries that they had, I think they're trying to go to the fact that maybe perhaps they were kidnapped from one place, brought back from another place, and wherever they were killed, they were tied up at that location. And, they couldn't defend themselves there because they were, held down, tied up, or whatever the case may have been. But if that were the case, there would be like marks on the wrist and stuff like that, and of rope marks and things of that nature that could have determined that, and that's not coming up here. So, regardless of if they fought back or not, the thought that they were taken someplace else and then brought back, and maybe held down or whatever the case may have been, still doesn't fit the evidence either. And so, to me, I think, when you have somebody, you have children here, right? These were preteens. I think one of them may have been 13, one was 12. Very young. And you have a guy with presumably, probably, maybe, possibly a box cutter and a gun. I think that it would not be unlikely that if, they went into shock pretty quickly. And I think when it came to Abby, I think there was, they described some of the injuries where it sounded like she had perhaps some head trauma, cerebral stuff. So I'm assuming that was head trauma. That could have been one of the reasons why she didn't fight back. She may have been knocked out. And so there's a lot of things that, the defense is trying to poke some holes into, but, and I get it, but not everybody reacts the same way to trauma. And I think that especially a young lady, a child, being frozen in fear probably is a good indicator. Probably is something that is more likely than not, in my opinion.
That he can't determine the time of death, which is pretty significant to both sides, I would think.
Yeah, so the coroner talked about that there were deep slits to the girls' throats and that it didn't appear that there were any defensive wounds on the girls. Why is this so important, and what can we learn from an autopsy finding like that?
Well, I think that you can sort of gather from the defense building their defense that they're establishing that it didn't appear that these girls fought back. Mm-hmm. And if this was a total stranger that they didn't know, you would expect them to fight back. Mm-hmm. It could also be that they're trying to establish that maybe the injuries didn't happen in that location. And that's why we're not seeing wounds consistent with them fighting back. Maybe they were tied up somewhere else or taken somewhere else and being held down in a certain way that they couldn't fight back. So I think we have to assume that they could potentially be going that way with those questions. Mm-hmm.
They're also going to bring up, and I'm sure we're going to go over it here in a little bit, but I want to bring it up now, is that there was a phone, how Libby's phone was used or the text message she got. She got, I think, like a few text messages all at once at 4 a.m. And I think that's also kind of fueling the fire that maybe perhaps, it's just brought back. Maybe the phone was off before. That's when it turned on. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. It sounds like the phone was under a shoe underneath the body of one of the victims. And if that area is not the best in service already, and you have a lot of people in that area trying to reach out to them, calling them, stuff like that, and if they're kind of far from the network, I can see where, they may be in an area that they don't have service. It might be a spot that, it doesn't work for them. And then in the middle of the night, it's actually like 4 a.m. It was a warmer than usual time of the year, February. There's probably steam coming up from the rivers or the creek. That's pretty common at those time of year to see those things happen. And moisture in the air reacts a funny way when it comes to service. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that service was amplified due to the moisture in the air. And that's why at 4 o'clock, that's when all those text messages started to roll in. And so I don't think that anybody took them away and then brought them back. That would be crazy. I mean, I know the entire situation is crazy already, but that would be very foolish and stupid to do, despite everything that they've done in this case. Maybe, obvious and got him caught for a reason, but you'd have to take victims away, take their lives and then bring them back to an area where people are searching for them. It doesn't make sense to do. I don't see where those dots connect. So for me, that doesn't jive. And so, I know a lot of people, including myself, me and the guys, we've seen the crime scene photos before. And I think a lot of people will indicate that, hey, there's not a lot of blood in the area and those type of things. But to me, first thing we have to realize is we don't know when those pictures were taken, at what part of the investigation they were taken at. There seems to be a lot of new leaves on the floor. And if, they passed and then, throughout that day and night, more leaves came down on the ground and, they found them. They may not have been like completely covered with leaves, but may have had some leaves on them. And at the time when those crime scene photos were taken, the leaves from the bodies may have been removed already. And so that way may it show or appear that there isn't, leaves or any of those things on those specific crime photos. Now, I don't know about the other ones. I haven't seen the ones that they presented in court. I only saw the ones that were leaked out before trial started. And so to me, and that was one of the first things I questioned was at what part of the investigation were these taken? Was this taken before, this is as they approached it for the very first time? Or was this after, some removal of leaves and other debris from the bodies were removed completely, so then they can take the photos in that way with how it would have looked like at the moment when the perpetrator committed the crime before any leaves fell on the scene. So I think there's a lot that you can learn from that. Let's see. Isn't this the case that first got you into true crime, Daniel? Why did it take so long to go to trial? Well, those things happen. Now, trial takes forever. And yes, this was the first case that got us into true crime. Yes. When it comes to this case, though, specifically, I think there was some problems early on, like with those leaked pictures. I think they traced them back to the defense team, and they got removed from the case, and then they were brought back on. And they wanted to go forward earlier, and then they decided to hold off. And so those things happen. There's tactics in and out. Now, them getting, taken away from the case and then get put back on, it's probably not something anybody anticipated or not something that you planned for, prolonging your case. But when something like a leak happens and those things occur, that's a possibility. And Richard Allen wanted his guy. I wasn't opposed to Richard Allen getting his lawyers, the ones that he had. So, the only question that I had was if he ends up getting found guilty, if he would have ever had to, if he could appeal on like bad representation because of the leak and a bunch of other stuff that occurred, which could later on get him a new trial and have to redo this whole thing. So that's kind of where I was seeing that at, but just kind of my 2 cents on the things. Let's continue this.
And we also heard testimony today from a woman who saw Bridge Guy on the day of the murders. And it was a quite contentious moment because that's when she testified that she saw blood splatter on him, which was a detail not in the first interview with police. So why is this important and what's happening here in this matter?
Well, when you think of blood in the context of a murder investigation, that's a pretty significant detail. And to see a man who was muddy and bloody versus just muddy, and we heard from the defense, from the questions, that she said muddy at least 13 times without ever saying bloody in one of the statements that she gave, that's pretty significant. And so what I think they're trying to establish is that she's not extremely credible. The jury would have received an instruction on witness credibility, how to assess their credibility, because they don't know these people. And so they're trying to establish that you can't believe absolutely everything that you hear coming from this witness in particular.
And what's your assessment of the case so far?
Well, I think what we're seeing is exactly.
So when it comes to the the witness that described the muddy, bloody person, they also brought up the sketches that they didn't want. The state didn't want in court because they thought it would confuse the jury. And I'm not too familiar with how that works as far as like sketches and stuff like that. Witness testimony is probably one of the most least what's the word I'm looking for? It's the most unreliable piece of evidence that you can possibly get. Because in the moment, nobody's trying to remember unless a crime is being committed in that moment. If you walk past somebody, you might remember some features, but unless anything really didn't catch your eye about that person, and even at that, only small details about what it is that caught your eye, you may remember. But for the most part, people forget a lot of things if it's not something that they have to remember. I mean, try to think back, like, because this, obviously they passed away, and then, their bodies were found, and they probably, I don't know when it was that they talked to these witnesses, these 3 juveniles that were walking in. May have been a couple of days later. And so can you describe everybody that you saw a few days ago at the store? If I were to tell you that one of them committed a murder? You get what I'm saying? It's going to be very difficult. And, human beings in general have the tendency of trying to fill in the gaps to things. Even when it comes to like you're seeing things on the wall, that's when you can see like, Jesus in the tortilla or something like that. It's I can't remember what the name is, but it's just because your eyes are searching and they're creating things. And so, anywho, I digress. Let's continue.
Exactly what we should expect from the state. Again, they're sort of building a picture, right? A criminal case is like putting together a puzzle. With each additional piece, the picture starts to come into view. So they're doing exactly what they should be doing. But at the end of their case, we should be able to see that picture in order for them to meet their burden.
I thought it was interesting what they were saying about the bridge guy. I mean, we've been assuming all along that the bridge guy is the person who was the killer, but this does kind of raise some questions about that.
It does. And that just goes back to building that puzzle. Right now, you cannot see the clear picture of that puzzle, and that's their job to make that clear to that jury, because it's not clear at this point, but their case also hasn't closed.
Yeah, we're in the
True. I'm not there in trial, so I'm only going based on some of the things that are being presented and things of that nature, and talking to people who are there. And so I don't know, to me it seems pretty cut and clear. Maybe not really. Let me rephrase that. To me, it seems some of it is pretty obvious. Some of it, there's questions, I mean, but the trial is barely starting. The trial's barely starting. So, if I was, on the jury and I had to pull one way or another where I felt about this case, I'd probably say 65, 70% guilt. Maybe it'll change once we continue to talk about these things. So autopsy photos were shown. This is from the Carroll County Comment. Autopsy photos were shown as evidence today. Forensic pathologist testified that Abby received 1 wound to her neck and marks on her face and neck and abrasions to her upper lip, suggesting something was placed there. Okay. Libby received 4, possibly 5 wounds to the neck as well. Smaller abrasions to her upper neck and shoulder area. Libby also had cerebral edema, swelling of the brain, giving her their injuries. Both girls could have lived for about 10 minutes, for 4 to 10 minutes after sustaining the injuries. No afternoon live update. Okay, so a little bit about the injuries. And thank you, 49 Girl, for your membership. It's truly appreciated. So let's continue. So here's the questions about the bullet. Now, first and foremost, they're calling it a magic bullet, which to me kind of tells you where the defense is going with this. They want to talk about some conspiracy theories. They want to talk about Odinist theory. They're calling this the magic bullet. This is trying to put in to the jury's mind that, hey, conspiracy, JFK, you got all this stuff. Start thinking out of the box. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I'm seeing it from this point of view, and maybe perhaps they're also seeing this magic bullet as their phrase for something crazy, like if the glove don't fit type of thing that was happening back in the day. Maybe that's their claim to fame if Richard Allen is found innocent. All right, let's continue. Let's look at this video about the bullet.
About for the first time yesterday, I think in court, we were finally hearing them refer to this as a cartridge. But throughout the last several years, even and months, we kept hearing unspent bullet.
Right.
A lot of people were criticizing me for saying, I'm only using what police and prosecutors are saying. First of all, is it a cartridge that you believe was on scene or an unspent bullet? What is it?
Yeah, the term unspent bullet is a very inaccurate term, but it's the one everyone's been using since it was discovered allegedly between the bodies of the girls. And if you walked into a gun store and said, I need to buy some bullets, they would know what you were talking about, but you're actually referring to the full cartridge. And I actually brought one here that's here on the table in front of us. That's a full cartridge, which actually has 4 components. It has a shell casing, usually made out of brass, in this case, nickel-plated brass. And then the bullet is actually the projectile here that's coated in a copper alloy. But that's the bullet. That's the projectile that travels downrange and hits your target or whatever it is that you're shooting at. And then there's gunpowder inside the casing. And lastly, there's a primer, which is just a cup of chemical that ignites on impact, and that's what makes the gun fire. But the bullet technically is just a projectile. In this case, the copper-coated projectile at the very top of the cartridge. The whole thing with all 4 components is a cartridge.
When now we're hearing that this came from, according to the prosecutors, one came out of a gun that belonged to Richard Allen. First of all, yesterday we heard for the first time that there was a sound from that 45 seconds of Libby German that sounded like some kind of mechanical sound. Some people are saying that was probably a gun or something being cocked. What ways can a bullet come out of a gun? And then we're going to get to the part about how markings would be on it. Without it being fired, how would a bullet fall out of a gun?
Really, there's one way. And if we're talking about a semi-automatic firearm and a handgun, there's one way that really the cartridge can be removed from the chamber of the gun and ejected. And that's from operating the action of the gun, typically what we call racking the slide. The slide is the movable part on top of the frame of the gun. You pull that back, and there's something called an extractor. It's a little claw that hooks on to the rear edge. That's why it's shaped like this. The extractor
come out wide. You can see him.
is a little claw that hooks onto this edge, and it pulls the round out of the chamber of the gun. And then there's a separate component called an ejector. This is the extractor that pulls it out. Then an ejector, a lot of times, is just a face or a stop. And when the case or the entire cartridge hits that, it tosses it out the ejection port. So that's how you get it out of the gun, is you operate the action of the gun, or you fire the gun, and then the bullet goes downrange and the casing is ejected.
Okay, so in this case, we know that didn't happen because it was all still together. So about a minute left or less. What is the science behind being able to tell how you match that to whose gun?
It's really the same technology that's been around for a long time. It's called tool mark identification or tool mark technology. And what that is it's simply looking at the unique markings that a piece of metal, a harder metal like the steel of an extractor or an ejector, would make when it comes in contact with a soft brass casing of a round of ammunition or an empty shell casing if the gun was fired. So those harder pieces of metal hit the soft metal here on the casing, those leave a mark. And the technology says you can uniquely identify those, even as unique as fingerprints. There's a debate as to whether that's fully reliable science or not.
What do you think as an expert and as an attorney? Would you use the science or not use the science?
Well, it depends on whether the technology was correctly applied. That's really is. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you went through the appropriate number of iterations, the appropriate number of comparisons, you use the requisite level of magnification in your analysis. So the technology generally, I think you could say, is accepted within the scientific community of forensics. But was it applied correctly? That's where the rubber hits the road.
That's something that we're going to be hearing about in the days to come.
Sorry about that. I'm on mute. My bad. So as I was saying, as I apologize, when it comes to what he was saying is the tool marking the marking tool. I am no longer on mute. Sorry, guys. I still have my wife tell me I'm on mute because there's the background. It takes a while for it to go through. All right. Can y'all hear me now? Let me know. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you for letting me know that. All righty. So basically what I was saying was that he was saying that the tool marking technology is something that is and has been something from the past and has been there for a long time, and it's not just with the extractor tool. It's also with screwdrivers, hammers, or any other tools that have been used in crimes, whether they were assaults, homicides, or break-ins or things of that nature, trying to align a specific or a unique marking from a tool that occurred uniquely to that tool, or in this case, the extractor, is kind of, it's good science if applied right. So who applied it is going to be the question mark. Not who applied it, but like how they did it. They did the right thing. And I'm assuming it wasn't the Delphi Police Department. I'm assuming it was the Indiana State Police and forensic team. So let's see. Are you still not hearing me? Because I have it on. I have some people saying that they can hear me now. Good now, all clear. All right. Sorry, some people are just kind of. Let's see. Yeah, if you can't hear, just fast forward that. Well, anywho, so to me, he's absolutely right. It's going to come down to how it was applied and if it was applied well, and I'm sure the defense is going to come with their stuff. They're already calling it the magic bullet, and so interesting stuff there. Interesting stuff about how it is. I think it's going to end up being. I think it's going to be a big tool there, and the main reason, and one of the things that the defense is saying, one of the reasons they're calling it a magic bullet is because apparently the police officers didn't take a picture of them, a reel of pictures as they were pulling out the bullet from the ground. They took a picture of the bullet in the ground. They took a picture of it out of the ground. They took a picture of it in the lab, but not specifically pulling it from the ground. And I don't understand where the drawback is. You see the bullet in the ground, you see it out of the ground. It's probably dated. You know what I mean? It's probably dated back in 2017. These things were probably logged in then. It was probably ballistics that were done back then that are logged in, time dated, and the whole 9 yards. And so is their theory that when they decided to point at Richard Allen, that they made his gun fit that ammunition, or made the ammunition fit his gun? They swapped it out. They went back into this database that has tremendous amount of like this type of stuff for in case anybody ever has an unsolved crime, and they have, like, for instance, a bullet casing that went through there. You can kind of match this weapon to multiple crimes. It's happened often, actually. And so they would have to get into that database, change that without anybody knowing, and or frame Richard Allen back in 2017, wait 5 years before they arrest him, and completely go down an avenue that ended up being a goose egg, or several, actually. I mean, there was the Ron Logan Avenue, there was the Keegan Klein Avenue, which at the time there was reasons to be suspicious. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have gone down those avenues, but there was reason for suspicion, and they went down there and they cleared them one way or another. And in the Ron Logan search warrant, I believe they were looking for guns. And if there's audio of a gun slide being pushed back or slid back, that tells me that they knew about this. They had the ballistics on this way back then. I'm not sure where the dot is connecting that this was planted somehow back 5 years before his arrest, or any of those things. Those things aren't jiving in my mind right there. Let's see. I got one question right here. My question is, why prevent the defense from calling an expert witness on the evidence the state is using at trial. Well, it depends on if that expert is qualified, and if their field of study is the same as, or if their field of study is in the proper direction. I'm not familiar with what evidence you're talking about, but that's one of the reasons why is if if the expert isn't qualified or doesn't meet a certain criteria, things of that nature. I mean, not every expert's allowed. They have to have a reason. And from what I understand, if it's the Odinist expert, I think that I don't think they think they found out she don't have enough credibility, or she wasn't as much of an expert as the defense may have thought. But let's see. If I saw a clip of Bridge Guy and it was my husband of years and years, I would recognize him. Love is blind. Love is blind. You will see things that aren't there just because you can't fathom that being what happened. Look at all these like serial killers who have been convicted, confessed, and they have, these women that are falling for them, going at them and thinking that they're innocent. I mean, there was one thing on Netflix, I think I brought it up not too long ago, where there was a guy who had taken the life of his stepdaughter, and her biological mother was, out looking for her, found out she was missing. She knew that the stepfather had committed the crime. She even pointed out where the body was at on the yard, and come to find out after years of pushing the issue, it was found out that the guy had not only taken the life of his stepdaughter, but several different women. He confessed to it all. And his wife would always say, don't be confessing to things you didn't do. And she was just, even after he said he did it to her face, she was not willing to let go. So love is blind. And some people, even if it's standing right in the face, won't see what's happening. I mean, how many times have you seen something going kind of sketchy in a friend's relationship, and you're like, man, how don't you not see this? It's because love is blind. All right, so now we're going to get into some, let's see. I missed the mods who used to shout out drink all the time. Well, drink. This is the Drunk Turkey Show. All right, so let's go into this one. This is about Bridge Guy. I'm just going to play a little bit about it, and then I'm actually going to show a video about the Bridge Guy that I found.
Richard Allen was arrested. They've insisted that this crime was committed by someone referred to as Bridge Guy. And Bridge Guy is the person that Libby German captured on her cell phone on the Monon High Bridge, we believe just moments before the girls were murdered. So today the jury got to hear a whole lot more about Bridge Guy. For the first time, the jury got to see a video. All of us in the courtroom got to see a video 43 seconds long that Liberty captured on her phone on the day of the murders. And I can't, unfortunately, show you that video. The judge is not allowing us to record it or to show it, and she's not allowing cameras inside the courtroom. So I can't show it to you, but I can tell you about that video. So let me kind of explain what was on that video. It shows Abby and Libby on the Monon High Bridge, the camera that Libby had, the phone.
So we kind of heard about this. The camera faces back. You see him, but let's look up that video I wanted to show you guys, because this is a recreation of the Bridge Guy, and you can kind of see him walking here. And I think it's Gray Hughes who does either this one or another one that is pretty. It's interesting. I'll show it to you here in a second. But as I said, this guy looks like a small dude. I've said that since the beginning, and I haven't been watching this since the beginning. But based on like how tall like Abby was when in the picture, you don't look much taller than her. So you can see here, this guy, when seeing everything here, this guy looks like he's a smaller guy, and we'll be able to tell when we get in a little bit here. Let's see. So right here, one thing I had noticed on both sides of the pants is that they're folded upward and kind of saggy. I know I had Rick Snay on here who said that he was pretty tall and that he has saggy pants, but the thing is his pants aren't folded up several times to show the white part of the jeans. Right? They have to be folded up twice for that to happen. The arms are all scrunched up, the shirt sticking way out. Those are all indicators of a person who is shorter. These aren't indications of a person that is taller. If a taller person folded up their pants at the bottom, you would see ankles and stuff visible. You don't see that. A taller person would have a much more difficult time finding the sleeve cover all the way up to his wrist. Even when his arm is bent, it might get there, but it's not going to be scrunched up in that manner. This person is definitely a smaller person, in my opinion. But let's see. You can see, I know a lot of people were pointing out. Hold on.
Stabilized video from the suspect.
All right, great. Let's see. I want to see the actual part where he starts showing him walking. So a lot of people were talking about the way he lifts up that leg, right? That looked like the way certain persons walk. It looks like he's lifting up that leg to actually step over probably one of the broken. There was a lot of broken pieces of the bridge there. I think a few people have gone on that bridge to go check it out, and as you can see, I mean, this just, to me, this looks pretty obvious that this person's short. There's so many indications of that. The size of the jacket or the sweater, size of the shirt, size of the clothing, the fact that he has to flip up both pant legs. Yeah, this guy's on a shorter realm of things. If this was like somebody like Ron Logan, he'd have a lot more different problems than this. Let's see. This video right here, this comes from Gray Hughes. This one's one of the more clear videos that I've ever seen. So I wanted to show that to you guys. And then what also came up in court was this. This is a recreation that a news deal did relative to or referencing one of the confessions that he had written out, and this is for the Indiana Department of Correction. This was from March 5th, 2023. It says Richard Allen, date of birth. It says, I am ready to officially confess killing Abby and Libby. And then there's something I can't understand. I hope to get the opportunity to tell the families I'm sorry. Now, I know a lot of people have brought up like, oh man, he confessed here, he confessed there, he confessed, 60 times. What makes one more than the other? Well, I think it was the pathologist had mentioned in trial too that what he thought, and this was way before any of the confessions of Richard Allen, that he thought that the markings could have been from a box cutter. And one of the confessions that Richard Allen had is utilizing a box cutter. So kind of interesting. Now I know he said a bunch of other things and said some other stuff, and people say that, hey, people in, where he was at, it creates false, or the defense is trying to say it creates false confessions, but it's not like he wouldn't be there if he's found guilty. There's other people in those situations. You know what I mean? And it's not like he's being treated with cruel and unusual punishment just because it's outside of the norm of what happens prior to trial. It doesn't mean that it's that they're torturing the man or anything of that nature. A lot of the stuff from what I've read and seen is self-reported and self-done. And a lot of it came after the first time that he confessed. So, you know, to me, did he accidentally let it out? Knew he let it out and then just went crazy based on that? That's possible. It's possible. But for those that think, well, maybe perhaps well, let's bring this up real quick. Like, what about before he got arrested? What if he said something there? Would that make you think that maybe these confessions or something, if it was happening before his arrest? Well, let's listen here from Carroll County Commit.
It doesn't matter. It's over. No, the trial of Richard Allen isn't over, but those are the words that Richard Allen said to ISP Lieutenant Jerry Holman on October 13th, 2022, as police searched his residence. Holman told Allen that if there was any damage to anything inside his home, he would be reimbursed. Allen then said to him, "It doesn't matter. It's over." When the search was completed, Holman again said to Allen, "If there's anything that is damaged, we'll have a form for you to fill out, and then you can get reimbursed." Allen repeated the statement, "It doesn't matter. It's over." That came before his arrest later that month. It was a tense day in the courtroom as we returned after lunch, as the defense did their cross of Steve Mullen, really questioning him and hitting hard on the information about Richard Allen's.
So they're doing a search. This is after they did a conversation with him referencing, you know, this is when they talked to him the second time, asked him to come in. He even let them use, you know, look at his cell phone, did a bunch of other things, right? And, you know, they were talking about this specific case. The next day they get the search warrant. They go to his house. As they're walking in, they say, "Hey, if there's any damage, we're going to repay it." And his first reaction is, "It doesn't matter. It's over." That's interesting. That's interesting. You know, and, you know, when you start to look at things and you start to piece together everything that has been done and everything that's been said. So this man arrived at the trail at around 1:30. We know that because there was a set of juveniles who were taking photos of themselves on the trail at 1:26, about a third, maybe a quarter of a way through the trail, heading out of the trail. And that's when they see a person that they think, or that is who police are saying is Bridge Guy, walking in. At the same time or afterwards, Richard Allen talks about his trip to the Monhan High Bridge that day. And in his statement, he's talking about walking in at 1:30. This is the first time. And what corroborates both stories is the fact that Richard Allen indicates that he sees a group of juveniles walking out as he's walking in. So there you go. You have these two people talking about the same incident and at the same time. And now there's even phone evidence, I believe, that he was there at 1:30. Okay. All right. So we also did video on how long it would take to get from the entrance of that trail to the high bridge. We did that by a couple of things, looking at what factoring the distance, factoring average, pace, people walk at, and then increasing that because he was walking with authority, wasn't running. So it's not like he went from, walking a Sprite 2.5 miles an hour and walking 8 miles an hour. No, that's not how it works. So as fast as he could have possibly been going is maybe 4. And so even at that, it would have taken him 13 minutes to just get to the high bridge. That would have been 1:43. At 1:45, another witness gets down and is parking near the Mears parking area and comes onto the high bridge, or onto the trail, which is the entrance most closest to the high bridge. She walks that direction at 1:43, sees a person on the high bridge, turns around, walks back, and as she's walking towards the high bridge, that's when Libby and Abby are getting dropped off at that same drop-off point. They walk in. She's already coming back, going down the trail. she sees Libby and Abby walking towards the high bridge. Now, for this not to have been Richard Allen, he would have had to have walked at 1:30 to the high bridge, gone to the middle of the bridge, as we already saw how many holes and all these things that are there. Got to the middle of the bridge so that way he can see into the water where the water was, because the water's, somewhere out there. So he can see the fish. Turn around, walk back, and pass the Myers entrance before that witness gets down at 1:43. It's impossible. It's impossible unless he was running, and that's not what was indicated, and that's not what he was saying either. So it is impossible that it could have been anybody else than him on that bridge. And I get, there's some trails and stuff other than that, but that was his words. That he went there, went specifically to the trail, and then went back to one of the benches and sat there. The problem is the first witness that came and saw him there at the bridge, allegedly, that came back around, well, she walked that trail back and forth 3 times. And at no time did she see anybody else sitting on any bench on that trail, like Richard Allen said. It would be different if Richard Allen said himself that he went down a different trail, or that he was somewhere else, or he was doing something else. It's not the case. And so you have confessions early, way before any of this, and in 2017, I don't know if there was any body cams or any of those things back then, or this was 2022. I'm not sure. I mean, detectives, sometimes they have body cams, sometimes they don't. I would assume that maybe, this is Delphi again. This isn't the biggest department in the world, so I'm not familiar with how much stuff that they get. Like, for instance, I know that, when I was an officer in a smaller town. We didn't get things till way later, like way later. Like, well, officers in larger cities were utilizing new technology that didn't even require DVDs or anything like that, where they would just park in the station and everything that they recorded would be put through the air, download into the system through the air. We were still using VHSs. So we were years behind what everybody else had. I'm not sure if there was a recording of this indication of when old boy said that this was the case. But let's be real about it. If your defense is the cops framed me and they're saying things to put me in jail, kind of tells you don't have the strongest defense. That's, the bullet, everything else that was ballistically looked at years ago, way before they could have ever even had Richard Allen on the radar. Well, let's continue.
Car being seen on 300 North the day of February 13th, 2017, and looking at that timeline. He said that Mullen wanted the vehicle to be on the road, but that it was not. Mullen insisted, as did others, that car was traveling on the road, just as Richard Allen had said to him in another interview in October. The day followed with the information of what was collected from Richard Allen's home the day of the search warrant. And I want to highlight a few of those items for you. Among those, 12 phones, 2 beepers, nearly 30 knives and 4 box cutters, a blue Carhartt jacket, boots, and inside a keepsake box that was ornate on top, they found a letter to Richard Allen from his mother, some photos, and a .40 caliber hollow point bullet that was Smith & Wesson brand, similar to that which was found at the crime scene underneath the body, or between the bodies of Abby and Libby. Libby, police said. We were just getting out of court for the day. I have over 60 pages of notes.
And she's going to talk about going to a website. We're going to go to that website and see that as well. But I wanted to just kind of end that on this point. I'm going to look at some of the questions and comments that I have here. Let's see. One of them says, I'm just going to kind of go backwards from the ones I got. That Elvis dude saying he could explain why his DNA might be on the scene was so strange too. I agree, that was strange, and I thought that was, an interesting statement. However, was his DNA there? If it wasn't there, okay, I get it. But if it, he's probably getting arrested. And I'm very suspicious about the horns thing, even though it don't look like horns because they're going like that over her in a cross. Not a cross like a religious cross, but like the sticks crossed together, and not necessarily like horns that go up. Yeah. So, anyways, was it there though? That's the question when it comes to that. He can say those things, but was it there? With Richard Allen, he could say all these confessions, but if there wasn't corroborating evidence like the casing or the cartridge that was found, the fact that they have 23 phones and pagers of Richard Allen's, he has saved every one he's ever had except for the one that he was using in 2017. What are the odds of that? Saving your pagers and stuff from back in the day, phones from back in the day, every phone you've had except the one where you were utilizing during the time when these murders occurred. Let's see. So reporters who were in the courtroom practically said no blood at the scene. Then others said covered in blood. It is so confusing to me. The girls' bodies were covered in blood. You can see a little bit. What I don't want to get too graphic, but from what you can see is there is blood on Libby that is noticeable. As far as on the ground, to me, the bodies look like they were at one point moved there, right? And which means that I don't think that the crime necessarily happened in that specific spot where their bodies laid. I think it may have happened a couple of feet or a couple of maybe yards away, and they were moved to this location. And so if they were moved to this location and they were pouring, blood, it's going onto the dirt, right? It's going into the ground. It's not puddling up on concrete or any of those things, right? So it's going into the dirt, into the ground, and that's going to spread underneath the leaves, which there were quite a bit of leaves. So the leaves are probably what are covering majority of what you can't see in those pictures from the crime scene. And I suspect that there may have been some more leaves because it sounded like in some of the pictures there was dirt and stuff and debris that they had to get off of them first. And if that was the case, compared to the crime scene photos that I saw, there weren't any. So that tells me that maybe perhaps those photos that I saw were a little bit later in the processing of this crime scene. May not have been how they were discovered. This may have been how they think that the scene was left without perhaps the small debris that may have fallen overnight. All right, let's see. I got a couple more of these. Let me see these. Okay, so Ari said, yeah, no, I understand what he said, but it's like, when did he say that? All right, was that after he accidentally said he did it and then started going crazy and then started making all these weird confessions? Was it part of his plan? I don't know. There are some people there was this one, I wish Jaime was here because he was talking about it the other day. He was telling me that there was this one like serial killer who was friends with cops. He would talk to them. And he would go in and confess to a bunch of murders that he didn't commit. That way, if anybody suspected him of doing the one that he did do, they would look past him. And so maybe that's some sort of, tactic of his. I don't know. But, I think maybe perhaps the good possibility is that he was doing okay. He was doing all right. He slipped up, apparently, and told one of his family members that he may have committed the crime. And then after that is when he started going psycho. So I don't know. Is the timing in that? How's the timing in that work? Okay. Let's see. So let's go to that Comet website real quick. So this is evidence from Ground Zero upsetting jurors, family, and the axis that she was talking about. So this is CarrollCountyComet.com. McLeland said, the case against Richard Allen was about 3 things. He wasn't wrong. Well, you know what? I haven't even finished these. I apologize. Can't see the motive. Well, with can't see the motive, I mean, I get it, but like these crimes happen, right? Like somebody goes out there and commits these crimes. Some people do it for very sick reasons that aren't understandable. You know, there's not always a clear motive in some of these things. Let's see. People are questioning how he got to the end of the bridge so quickly. I mean, somebody got to the end of the bridge very quickly. I'm not sure. He may have been there quite a few times. I think they said that they felt that the person that committed this crime was familiar with the area. Apparently, he's gone there a couple of times. From what I understand, one of the main reasons he went and spoke to the sheriff deputy was because, or to the person that took his statement back in February 2017 that he was there. It's because his wife knew he was there. And so he had told his wife he was going out there. He was out there. And, you know, apparently if he told his wife he was out there, he's probably familiar with that place. You know what I mean? All right. He was there between 1:30 and 3:30, his admission. That's true. That is true. Let's see. All right, we're caught up. We're caught up. If you have any questions, hit those stars. Hit those stars. Okay. All right. So Allen is charged. I'm not sure if this is true or not. 4 counts of felony murder. I don't know. I don't know how the counts work there in Indiana. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It says 4. I thought it'd be 2, but maybe there's other counts that are added on there, including those that increase the count. I'm not sure. But in the passings or the deaths of Abby Williams and Libby German, Carroll County teens took advantage of a day off from school to go exploring on the Monhan High Bridge Trail, never made it home. State of Indiana presented 116 exhibits Monday. Among those were graphic crime scene photos, other girls taken by ISP, CIS, Jason Page, Dwayne Datsman, and Brian O'Healy on February 13, 2016. So this is going to talk about who was first on scene, what they saw, and how they saw things. Carroll County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Giacola and Drew Yoder, I apologize for butchering that name, were the first law enforcement on scene. The jury heard from Darren first on Monday. He told jurors that he was scheduled to be off at 10 p.m. that evening. He heard word of 2 missing girls. He came to help. Darren was tasked with looking into an iPad that belonged to one of the girls. When the lock screen prohibited access, he drove to the Monhan High Bridge Trail to help with the search. I teamed up with civilians and fire department personnel. We searched south of the bridge to make a line to the creek. All right, this isn't what I was wanting to read. Give me a second. Okay. All right. So what I wanted to pull out of here was when they didn't pick up the sticks and why they didn't pick up the sticks. Let's see. I think what it had said in here was because there was moss and there were some other things that they weren't at the time. You know, there was like DNA was hard to get picked up off of those type of things. And I can say like fingerprints and DNA, maybe not DNA. When I was an officer, which was a lot longer than 2017. And so technology, and as I mentioned before, in a smaller town, as technology, back then I thought that it could have, touch or something. So I know that fingerprints were something that were probably not going to be pulled off of, a tree or moss or things of that nature. But, touch, DNA, those type of things, sweat, anything like that, I would have thought for sure. And I think they went and picked it up like a couple of days later, which is crazy. And so here's the bullet thing. And I think this is the one thing that I also wanted to talk about because I think it talks about who found it. So a continuous line of question from defense on cross-examination if law enforcement carried their weapons onto the crime scene. Of those that did, all claimed that their handguns used a 9mm or a 45mm ammunition. A 40 caliber Smith & Wesson bullet was found by investigators near Libby's ankle while using a blue alternative light source. Two of the investigators wore orange goggles to search for fluids on the bodies. Page said he did not remember recovering any trace evidence that he considered important to the case from the bodies of Abby or Libby. While searching for trace evidence, Datsman noticed something on the forest floor. I kept seeing it glittered down in the leaves, he said, noting that the reflection on the ALS on the bullet in the ground under the leaves. He brushed the leaves using a very light pressure. Underneath those leaves, he found a 40 caliber cartridge. Now, in the crime scene photos, the intact cartridge can be seen in the dirt at an angle with the nose pointed down. The defense pressured the witness on the integrity of the collection of that bullet, noting that they photographed it in the ground and in the lab, but did not document the actual collection of the evidence. I mean, I'm not sure that that's what's like. I don't know if I've ever seen pictures of like, of evidence being taken as it's being moved or placed in an evidence bag or any of those things, right? And so what is the thought there that they didn't show the bullet once it was out of the ground, so they could have switched it at that point? But at that point in 2017, what's the thought behind that? Are they going to wait 5 years to go and get Richard Allen with the bullet that they put there on purpose? Like go after all these loose ends that ended up being dead ends with Ron Logan and Keaton Klein for nothing, just to waste time, make the family members feel, relive this situation every time they think they have a solution. No, this ain't a movie. This ain't Matlock, So that theory on its own doesn't stand up to common sense in any sense of the matter. Now, I would assume, if they had a problem with Richard Allen and, he'd be a known person that they've had issues with in the past. I know he had one family violence disturbance that occurred at his house, but outside of that, he had a clean record. If he was well known, kind of like in the Avery case where everybody's like, oh yeah, making a murderer, right? There was reasons behind that. He knew the cops, they hated him, they had history, there was a relationship, those type of things. None of those exist in this case with Richard Allen. None of those. Not one. To choose the guy that works at CVS when you probably have a lot of other people that you can blame it on. A lot of other people that, at certain points, a lot of people thought that the evidence pointed directly at them. And yet you choose Richard Allen. It's just, I don't know about that. So did the bullet have blood or do they always show up on ALS? I don't know about that one. To be honest with you. I would assume they don't, because it's just brass and copper and stuff like that. I would assume that they don't unless there's blood on them. But I'll ask Steve from True Crime Web, our CSI friend. All righty. So Daniel, the ground was natural mulch, would soak up most of the blood. Libby moved around, and yet there was a large pool of blood pool. I would agree with that, and that's kind of one of the things I was saying. And I also thought that maybe perhaps the actual force wasn't being used in that location. I think that they may have passed in that area or maybe somewhere else and then dragged a little bit there. But if they weren't like pumping blood out at the time when they were put there, and let's just say that their life had already exhausted, then if there was blood that was still coming out, it would just kind of seep into the ground right behind them. It wouldn't be all over the place. You're right. Let's see. I haven't been able to watch. Have they disclosed what was found in the house? Yeah, they did. Oh, well, I don't think we've gotten there yet, but a lot of knives, a couple guns. The gun that they found with that matched the casing or the cartridge that was found between the bodies. Richard Allen's statement of "doesn't matter, it's over." I mean, that's pretty powerful, to be honest with you. I mean, that's before any of the confessions or anything else. Before his arrest, before he's put in jail. If he's coming out with a statement like that, it kind of tells you, he knew what happened. He knew where he was at. And so, once you put everything else together, it just kind of points in that one direction. And I know that there's some question marks about some other people, but if there was anything that would have put them there at the scene, then the defense could have used that to show a different, alternate theory of like the Odinist thing. But if they weren't able to show any evidence, like actual evidence, and not just an opportunity and a motive, potential motive. I don't even think they came up with a potential motive, but just the fact that they opportunity and that they were part of some sort of group made them more suspicious than others because there was symbols on them that can't be verified to be Odinist symbols. Like none of the symbols that are there look to be Odinist. I mean, one of them is supposedly everybody says is a tarot card. When the heck did tarot cards become a part of the Odinism symbolization? Now I get the other one with the leg bent, but the arms aren't in the same position than the Odinist one that's on their symbol. And so, some folks are just kind of trying to piece together different parts of different things to make it look like it's one thing more than what it wasn't. Now, I don't know why they were placed in that manner. It didn't look random to me. As well, let me put it this way. It didn't look like it was an attempt to conceal. I don't know what the attempt was or what the thought process was, but I mean, I don't know. Let's see. Exactly. Tarot and Odinism are completely two different things. And if somebody is putting something like that, let's just say that's the case, that they're mixing those things. And that's an obvious indication that the person doesn't know what they're doing and they're staging it to make it look like somebody else may have been, or another group may have been involved in this. But at the same time, I don't know. So I have a question about the same thing about the phone. It's very odd. What was about the phone? Let me see. Let me go up quick. Let me see. What's up, Jason? If Richard Allen and Brian Cooper are guilty of these brutal crimes, does this not show how evil some persons can be? Pure evil forces on their hands. Yeah. So, I mean, if that kind of tells you what kind of people they are, and you don't even have to look at just these two cases. You can look at cases in the past. Look at like a lot of people that kill people just for random reasons. There's been murders, like spree murders. There's been serial killers who have a thing against women, some that have a thing against children, some that are sexually motivated. There's a lot of things that can go into play, and there's just a lot of sick people out there. At the end of the day, not everybody's the same. What you may not do or are capable of. Obviously, if you see what somebody else does, because I mean, these crimes happen, right? These two little girls died and had their lives taken in 2017. The Koberger case, those victims in Moscow, Idaho, they passed and in a brutal manner. So that should tell you at least that there are people that are capable of this. And if just because you couldn't do it doesn't mean that somebody else isn't willing to. I mean, the prisons are filled with people that are willing to do a lot more things than you would imagine doing yourself. So it is what it is. Let's see. But what about the phone? Let's see. But if it was the phone, like if the issue was the phone, at 4 a.m., I mentioned this earlier, but I'll say it again. So the issue with the phone at 4 a.m. with a bunch of text messages coming in is not just an indication. Doesn't mean that's an indication that the phone was off and then turned on. that could be an indication of the phone being out of service. Now, I talked about how where they were located. I don't know, how good the service is in that area back in 2017. We also have to remember this was a while ago. So a lot of people might go there now or in the last couple of years, be like, oh, I got perfect service. Well, things have changed in the last 8 years. And so, or longer. How long has it been? About what? Yeah, about 7-8 years now. And so, back then, if they were out of service, where they were, and at night in February, it's cold. I'm sure you guys have seen it. Steam comes up from the creeks and the rivers and the lakes. I'm sure everybody has seen it. And so if there's moisture in the air, how does that react with the service? Is it possible that at the same time that you would expect this steam to arise from the river and the creeks, is it a coincidence that that's also the time that, most people are asleep, less people utilizing service, and a potential magnification of service due to the moisture in the air? Is it possible that's why they got signal in that moment? I think that's it. There's dew and there's so many other things that happen. And so there's a trick that you can try, like with your keys. If you can't find your vehicle, just put your key fob to your head, and if you push the button, you'll end up setting off the alarm a lot further than you would if you just put the key out in the air. And the reason being is because it's magnified through the liquid in your brain, as far as why it's pushing it out further. So those things are highly possible, in my opinion. And so I just don't think that that's something that says that somebody went back out there and turned it on, or any of those type of things, or that somebody went back there and tried to place the bodies there or bring them back, or any of those things. Because let's just say that they did leave somewhere and then they were brought back, where is the fabric from the vehicle that they were put in? Where's the evidence that they were moved from that location, whether there was rocks or dirt that was not from that area, that was from another area? If they were dragged from one location to another, like where's all that other evidence? There's none. And so no way that I think that that's possible. Let's see. Let's see. I want to give the girls some credit. Libby knew she had a picture of him on the phone, had been keeping it, and so she could have hid the phone in her shoe and Abby hide it behind her. No facts, just my theory. Maybe. I'm not sure how everything ended up the way it did, and how it ended up the way it did. But one of the reasons why I think they started filming this guy on the bridge comes back to the timeline of him being on the bridge. So if Libby and Abby are walking off, and there's pictures where they're taking at the same angle and you don't see bridge guy there. So if they're walking towards the bridge, and let's just say the bridge guy sees first witness that's walking towards the bridge turn around and walk away, I think there's a world or a possibility that may have been his initial target, is seeing that girl walking back by herself, and he walks in that direction, probably passes Libby and Abby, maybe looks at them in a certain way. I think that the juveniles that saw him as he was walking into the Mohan trail and they were walking out described seeing a unpleasant person. He looked like he was mean, something to that effect. And so maybe he gave Libby and Abby a look or something, and they get there on the bridge, and then now all of a sudden they see him coming back, walking at a good pace towards him. I think that would be a reason why they would have taken out their phones to record that situation. Like, hey, this guy looks creepy. He turned around, followed us back. So I think it's highly possible that that's what happened there in that situation. Okay. Yeah, so hey, Fox News, honk honk. Can AT&T hear us now? All right, let's see. I got a couple of things left to show. Why did Libby video bridge guy at such a far distance? Was there a previous encounter with the bridge guy before the bridge? Oh, I just answered that. So I'm glad you asked that. But yeah, I do think that there was a possibility of a previous encounter, because Richard Allen says himself that he was on that bridge, and the time frame in which it would have taken him to get on that bridge and to come off, it would have been impossible for him to get off before the first witness that entered through the Myers entrance. And so I do think there's a possibility, just because there wasn't any picture of anybody on the bridge or coming from that direction in some of the pictures that Abby and Libby took. And then it wasn't until that video comes in, if they can determine that those pictures came first and then the video, and then one can determine and what time it was. I think it was like at 2:13 or something, right? Is when that video of him coming across. Maybe it's a little bit earlier. I'm not too sure, but if he's walking back like at 146, 148 off the bridge to head towards, maybe 150 by the time he got off the bridge to head towards the person that he had seen, and then past Abby and Libby. I don't know. Maybe perhaps he was thinking about it for a couple minutes and then decided to go. And that kind of makes up what the time was and the difference in between there. Let's see. Also, the note of contention was the topography of the area and how steep it was. The defense argues that the girls were removed from the area between 5 p.m. on December 13, 2017, and returned to the area shortly after 4:30 a.m. The state contends the girls were at the scene sometime after 2:13 p.m. when Libby recorded the video of the man instructing them down the hill until they were found at 12:15 p.m. Tuesday on February 14th. Multiple exhibits showed a steep hills ravine and a floodplain area. Ole described that it was not one but two steep descents to get to where the girls were found. A gasp while showing the crime scene photos. The state experienced a technical difficulty causing the slides to advance quickly. The images went from a pulled back photo of the girls to a close-up of Abby's face and wound. A gasp could be heard across the courtroom when the photo was displayed. The images of the girls showed trauma they experienced that day, that their lives were taken. Abby was dressed in Libby's jeans and a Delphi swimming t-shirt, or swim sweatshirt, I apologize, with German on the back. She was wearing her own shoes, and there appeared to be slit on her shoes, or silt, I'm sorry, on her shoes. Clothes and sweatshirt, Ole said there was a pool of blood found between the girls just beyond their feet. Both suffered wounds beyond their necks, or wounds from their necks, with no other wound have been testified as to Monday. Ole said that Abby's clothes were wet. There was a line of wetness on the clothes. The waist of the pants was wet, he said. He also noted that the wetness on the sweatshirt. Ole said both girls had dirt on the bottom of their feet, most likely where shoes were off at some point. He said of Abby's Converse shoes, sticks were placed across the girls' bodies and were not removed from the scene as evidence until the first week of March. Vestman said, I saw no blood or anything on the sticks. Some were very rough and crumbly. They had moss on them. In all our experience, we never gotten any DNA off something like this. In my opinion, there wasn't evidentiary value on them, which I think was a mistake. Huge mistake. Okay. I just kind of want to scan through this, see if there was anything else. All righty. So this is from the Indy Star, and this is referencing what they found at Richard Allen's home. The trial of Richard Allen's continues on Thursday in Delphi, and the killings of Abigail Williams and Libby German. Richard Allen, 52, is accused of taking the lives of two teens who went missing February 13th, 2017, and found passed the next day. He was arrested in 2022 and faces 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of murder while killed. So that's why there's 4 counts. I got you. So I see it. It was not a typo. All right, so let's see this. So Wednesday, October 23rd, testimony continued in Delphi case against Richard Allen. knives, a photo album, and a gun, what police say they found during the search of Richard Allen's home. State capped Thursday's proceedings with a testimony of 2 Indiana State Police investigators who assisted in the October 2022 search of Richard Allen's home in Delphi. Prosecutors flipped through over a dozen photographs taken during the search of Allen's home, showing jurors photos of his house, his 2016 Ford Focus, and multiple knives in one image. Detective David Vito also assisted in the search, showing a photo of Allen's kitchen with a basket carrying everyday belongings such as keys. Vito stated that inside the basket next to it was a box cutter. Lieutenant Jerry Holman testified that while the search was underway, Allen was advised he could file a complaint if the house was sustained damage during their investigation. Allen replied, "It doesn't matter. It's over," Holman stated. Jurors also were shown a photo album of Allen home containing several photographs of his family along with the trails near the Mohan High Bridge. Allen's attorneys, Jennifer Auger and Andrew Baldwin, during cross-examination, countered that Allen has a fishing license and implied that fishers often use knives to cut their lines. Auger also stated that many families in Tippecanoe and Carroll counties traverse the trails. Alrighty. And then the next couple of things is about how they ended up finding out it was Richard Allen and who found it out. And that comes on this one. So let's listen to what they have to say here about that.
Courtroom for it, just like he has been every day so far. And Russ, what did you hear?
Well, good afternoon, Melissa. For the first time, Richard Allen was pointed out to the jurors in the courtroom, not as the Delphi double killer, but rather as a man who admitted that he was on the Monon High Bridge Trail the day Abby Williams and Libby German were murdered in February of 2017. No one has ever identified Richard Allen as Bridge Guy, the man who stalked Abby and Libby on the Monon High Bridge on that day several winters ago and then murdered them on the banks of Deer Creek. But this morning, jurors heard from DNR officer Captain Dan Doolin, who said 5 days after the killings, he was assigned to interview a man who wanted to self-report that he was on the bridge that day, a man named Rick Allen Whiteman. Whiteman is actually the name of the street where Allen lived at the time. Doolin said that Allen admitted he was in the area at the same time as the girls, and the DNR officer filed his report with investigators after confirming Allen's correct name. Jurors also heard from Kathy Shank, a volunteer who spent years entering tips and reports into the investigative file system. On September 21st, 2022, she found a summary of Allen's interview stuffed into a file folder. Shank told jurors she pulled out the report, read it, saw the name Richard Allen Whiteman, and that he admitted being on the bridge that day. She recognized the clerical error in his name and took the report to Carroll County's lead investigator, Tony Lickett, who was running for sheriff that month. She also said that an original tip sheet from 2017 with Allen's information on it also included the word cleared. Within 5 weeks of Shank's discovery of the misfiled report, Richard Allen was in jail and charged with the murders. Two interesting notes about Allen's life and his circumstances in the late winter of 2017 and the early spring. One, investigators said yesterday they've never been able to find the cell phone he was using that winter. And two, DNR officer Captain Doolin said that 6 weeks after the killings, Richard Allen applied for a new fishing license. But on that fishing license, his height increased from 5'4" to 5'6". His weight also increased. Interestingly enough, the woman who testified yesterday that she saw Bridge Guy the day of the killings was never asked by either the state or the prosecution how tall Bridge Guy was. Melissa?
Russ, that is interesting. Now, did you notice any different reactions in the room as that testimony focused on Richard Allen for the first time today?
Well, it was going on all morning, and his name came up several times. But when the first time he was ever pointed out from the witness stand by Captain Doolin of the DNR, Richard Allen sat passive at the defense table, as he has for quite a bit of this trial. And since he was not pointed out necessarily as the killer, but rather as a man who voluntarily came forward to self-report in 2017, there was really no reaction from either his side or the families in the courtroom.
Midday break in the Delphi.
All right. So it was a volunteer that found the interview, brought it up to the attention of Tony Liggett, and he's the one that started the investigation based off of that back into Richard Allen. And within 5 weeks, they had an arrest. You know, and I've said this multiple times, like once you find the right guy that you have, it don't take very long to get the evidence that you need, you know, to arrest them. Obviously, Ron Logan, Keegan Klein, They had some things that may have pointed in their direction, but they obviously didn't have enough to arrest them because they weren't ones that committed the crime. You know, there's certain things that have to happen. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the fact that, you know, if they don't see it, that it didn't happen, or they don't know anything about it. Or like, for instance, these other folks where they investigated, were other things done? And the answer would be yes. You know, like, for instance, in the Brian Koberger case, you know, we're not going to hear about any of the people that were at the grub truck, you know, Big Vito or whatever his name is, or any of those other people that were there. Maybe the guy that walked him there to the grub truck, but the other guys that were there, no. And the only thing that they're going to be able to talk to about that video is, you know, what pertained to him there. If he had an alibi, he had something else that shows that he wasn't there at the time of when the murders were there, they're not going to go into it. So just like, well, a better example would be like the person whose DNA that they took secretly off of a cigarette butt. That person's not the one on trial. They didn't arrest that person. So we're not going to hear who that person is, and about any other investigation of other people who were not the persons that weren't committed the crime, because there's evidence to say that they didn't. And so just to kind of tell you, like, once they got the right person, it's pretty quick. You know, things have to happen in order for somebody to commit a crime. You know, they would have to be, for instance, if this was Richard Allen, he would have had to have been not at home or at work on that day, which he wasn't. He would have had to have been there at the place, which he was, through the specific time that the murders would occurred, and enough time to get out and leave the place at the same time, within the time frame, which there's a window there. Right? There's nothing that excludes him. There's nothing that says, you know, that wasn't him. You know, you have sticks on top of them. That doesn't mean that he didn't put them on there. You know, they really, in my opinion, don't show much. And I think the strongest argument is that one looks like a tarot card and one looks like an Odin card that have nothing to do with each other. So I think if anything, it's probably more randomized. Maybe it's something in his head that he had seen or thought of that makes most sense. I do know that there's other people who are interesting. However, in the same token, if there's a video of the guy at a gym working out, then obviously he wasn't physically there to commit the crime. Now, if they had evidence to go and get his phone and download it and go through certain things to see if there was any conversations about, you know, these type of things happening in the past, if they were to go and do those things and that was part of their investigation and we don't know about it because they're not under arrest, you know, we'll never know that. It just doesn't mean that didn't happen. You know what I'm saying? And if they have a strong alibi of where they were during the time of the incident, I mean, you can push the issue all you want, but it's impossible if there's proof. I mean, if there's video or something. So just my 2 cents on the thought on those two things. I think there has to be more of, you know, it's got to be pretty concrete, in my opinion, to say, you know, it was somebody else. You have to have pretty convincing evidence to say it was someone else, because the evidence against the person that's accused is pretty convincing on its own. Is the evidence saying that it could have been somebody else more convincing? I don't think so. All right. Mama, thank you. You know, you have a happy birthday. Thank you for being a member and your support and being one of our mods. Let's see. I'm going to answer a few questions and then I'm going to call it a show. Let's see. Okay. They keep making a big deal of her saying he was in bed with her at 4:30 a.m., but I'm not sure why that's important. Well, I think the defense is trying to say that the bodies were put back at 4:30, which it couldn't have been him because he was in bed with his wife at 4:30. But that's not necessarily, like, what evidence do you have that, you know, where's the car fibers? Where's the rope marks from being tied up or any of those things, you know? It's just more, it has to be more than, oh, they started getting phone, you know, text messages at that time. I don't think it works that way. Let's see. Odinism and a tarot together make it more likely as an attempt to throw people off. Both practices are associated with paganism, but people who use runes would more likely use runes. Yeah, true. I mean, I think that when you're trying to do something like this, You're sending out a message, a symbol for whatever it is that you're doing. And it's usually something a little bit easier to figure out if you're sending a message out there. You know what I mean? This seems more like trying to throw people off, trying to throw people for a loop. But we'll see. I mean, he's not found guilty yet. And there still has to, the defense still has their entire case to put out as well. I'm interested in seeing how they put this out there. But as of today, I would say that I'm leaning more towards, the 75%, maybe even closer to 80 when it comes to was he involved? Now, could there have been somebody else that assisted him or had another part in this? Maybe, but I don't think he's ever said that in any of the 60 confessions that he's had. That I think that would be something that would be looked into if that was the case. But I want to say thank you to everybody. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Please like, please subscribe. Let's get those likes up. I'm probably going to be back a little bit later this weekend. I'm not sure if it's going to be on Saturday. I think it's going to be on Saturday, actually. Yeah, Saturday morning, we're going to have another live. And then I'm probably going to do a members only sometime on Sunday. Steelers don't play. So I know I have a Steelers podcast in the evening after all the games are done. So I might do something maybe midday on Sunday. I'll let you guys know. If I do, that's going to be for members only. So if you're interested in being a member, hit the join button. If you don't see a join button in the description, there's a become a member button or a link that you can follow to get on there. Highly recommend you do so. We have an amazing conversation every time we have a members only live. I appreciate everybody. We'll see what goes on in this case. Until next time, we'll see you next time. Peace out. Later.